I can do whatever I want to you. No, you can't. I have rights.
The aircraft cabin was dead silent except for the sound of a tablet screen illuminating a woman's face. Flight attendant Sarah Chen stood frozen in the galley, her hands trembling as she stared at the ownership documents glowing on the screen in front of her. Just 10 feet away, a little girl sat wrapped in a borrowed jacket, her lips still slightly blue from the cold, watching everything unfold with eyes far too knowing for a 10-year-old. Sarah's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no words came out. How had it come to this? How had a simple refusal to give a child a blanket turned into the moment that would destroy her entire career? But to understand how we got here, we need to go back. Back to that morning, 3 hours before takeoff, when this was just supposed to be a simple flight to a funeral. Maya Richardson woke up that Tuesday morning in her modest Brooklyn apartment with a knot in her stomach. The early sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of her small bedroom, casting shadows across the walls covered with hand-drawn pictures of airplanes. At 10 years old, Maya had learned to be brave about a lot of things, but today required a different kind of bravery. Today she had to say goodbye to the person who taught her what bravery meant. Her grandmother had passed away 4 days earlier, and the funeral was in Atlanta. Maya's mother had arranged everything, including something Maya had never done before, flying alone. The thought of navigating an airport and boarding a plane without her mother's hand to hold made her heart race. Maya pulled her small rolling suitcase from the closet. It was purple with a broken wheel that made it tilt to one side, decorated with stickers of clouds and planes. Inside, she carefully folded her funeral dress, the black one with the white collar that her grandmother had bought her last Christmas. She placed it on top, then added the framed photograph she'd been staring at for the past 4 days. Her grandmother's face smiled back at her from behind the glass, young and vibrant in her flight attendant uniform from 1965. That uniform meant everything. Her grandmother, Dorothy Richardson, had been one of the first black flight attendants hired by a major airline, back when that was something people wrote newspaper articles about. Back when it was revolutionary just to exist in certain spaces. Maya had heard the stories 100 times. How her grandmother had faced passengers who refused to be served by her. How she'd smiled through insults and kept her head high when colleagues treated her like she was invisible. How she'd saved every single paycheck, lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, and dreamed of a future where her children wouldn't have to fight so hard just to be seen. Maya traced her finger along the frame's edge and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Grandma. I promise I'll be brave." In the kitchen, she found the note her mother had left on the counter, written in that precise handwriting that always made Maya feel safe. "Baby, I had to leave early for a meeting, but I'll see you at the airport at 6:30. Eat the oatmeal I left in the microwave. Remember, chin up, shoulders back, smile at people even when you're nervous. You're a Richardson. We belong everywhere we go. I love you more than all the stars. Mom." Maya read it 3 times, committing it to memory, then ate her oatmeal while watching the morning news. She washed her bowl, dried it, and put it away just like her grandmother had taught her. "Never leave a mess for someone else to clean," she'd always said. "That's not who we are." At 6:15, Maya was sitting on the apartment building's front steps with her tilted purple suitcase and her backpack covered in airplane pins when her mother's black sedan pulled up. Victoria Richardson stepped out, and even at 6 in the morning she looked like she'd stepped off the cover of a business magazine. Navy blue suit, natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun, pearl earrings that caught the early light. But her eyes were red-rimmed and tired. Grief had carved shadows under them that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Hey baby," Victoria said, pulling Maya into a hug that lasted longer than usual. Maya felt her mother's heartbeat against her cheek, fast and unsteady. "I'm okay, Mom," Maya whispered. "I promise I'm okay." Victoria pulled back and looked at her daughter with an expression Maya couldn't quite read. Pride maybe. Or fear. Or both. "I know you are. You're the strongest person I know." She cupped Maya's face with both hands. "Listen to me. If anything feels wrong on this flight, anything at all, you call me immediately. I don't care what it is. You understand?" Maya nodded. "Mom, it's just a flight. I'll be fine." I know you will. But promise me anyway." "I promise." The drive to JFK Airport took 40 minutes, most of it spent in comfortable silence. Victoria kept one hand on the steering wheel and one hand holding Maya's, their fingers interlocked the way they'd been since Maya was small enough to need help crossing streets. The radio played soft jazz, the kind her grandmother used to hum while cooking Sunday dinners. As they pulled into the departure terminal, Victoria turned off the engine but didn't immediately get out. "Maya, there's something I want you to remember today." "What's that?" Your grandmother spent her whole career fighting to prove she belonged in spaces where people told her she didn't. She did that so you wouldn't have to fight those same battles. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. She did that so you could walk into any room, any airplane, any place in this world and know without question that you belong there. Do you understand? Maya nodded, not quite understanding but sensing the weight of what her mother was saying. If anyone, and I mean anyone, makes you feel like you don't belong somewhere, that's their problem, not yours. You hear me? I hear you, Mom. They walked into the terminal together, Victoria's heels clicking on the polished floor, Maya's worn sneakers squeaking slightly. The sneakers were old, a little too small if she was honest, but she loved them because she'd spent an entire afternoon drawing tiny flowers all over them with fabric markers. Her grandmother had helped with the roses on the left foot, her artistic hand steady and sure. Maya would never throw these sneakers away even when her toes pressed against the front. The check-in counter was bustling with early morning travelers, everyone moving with that particular urgency airports seemed to create. Victoria approached the counter with Maya's confirmation number already pulled up on her phone, her business demeanor sliding into place like armor. The gate agent, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and laugh lines, smiled at them both. Good morning. How can I help you today? My daughter is flying as an unaccompanied minor to Atlanta. Maya Richardson. The agent typed quickly, then looked up with a warm smile directed at Maya. First time flying alone, sweetheart? Maya nodded. Yes, ma'am. Well, you're going to do great. Let me just get your paperwork sorted out. More typing than a pause. The agent looked at Victoria with recognition flickering across her face. Ms. Richardson, I see you have quite a travel history with us. Victoria just smiled. I fly frequently, yes. What the agent didn't say out loud, what she couldn't say given privacy policies, was that Victoria Richardson's name flagged in their system as a platinum elite member with thousands of flight segments. What she also couldn't say was that a note in the system indicated this passenger was more than just a frequent flyer. But the agent had been doing this job long enough to read between lines. She processed Maya's boarding pass with extra care. You know what? The agent said, fingers dancing across her keyboard. We have some space available in first class, and I think Maya would be very comfortable there as an unaccompanied minor. The flight attendants can keep a closer eye on her. Victoria's eyebrow raised slightly. That's very kind. Are you sure? Absolutely certain. It's our pleasure. The agent printed the new boarding pass and handed it to Maya with a wink. Seat 2A. That's a window seat, honey. You'll have a great view. Maya's eyes widened. She'd never sat in first class before. Thank you so much, ma'am. That's really nice of you. The agent's smile grew. You're very welcome. Now your mother will walk you to security, but after that you'll be on your own until you reach the gate. One of our staff will meet you there and make sure you get on the plane safely. Sound good? Maya nodded, clutching her new boarding pass like a golden ticket. They made their way through the terminal, past coffee shops and bookstores and groups of travelers camped out by charging stations. At the security checkpoint, Victoria knelt down to Maya's level, not caring that her expensive suit was touching the airport floor. Okay, baby. This is where I leave you. But I'm not worried because I know exactly who you are. You're Dorothy Richardson's granddaughter and Victoria Richardson's daughter, and that means you're made of steel wrapped in kindness. You're going to walk through that security line with your head up. You're going to be polite to everyone. And if you need anything at all, you call me. My phone will be on the entire time. Even in your meeting? Victoria smiled. Especially in my meeting. You're more important than any meeting could ever be. They hugged again, tighter this time, and Maya felt her mother slip something into her jacket pocket. When she pulled back and checked, she found 3 $20 bills and a note that read, "For snacks or emergencies. I love you, Mom." Maya watched her mother walk away, Victoria turning back 3 times to wave before finally disappearing around a corner. Then Maya took a deep breath, adjusted her backpack and joined the security line. The TSA agents were efficient and not unkind. Maya removed her shoes, placed her backpack in a bin, walked through the metal detector without incident. On the other side, she sat on a bench to put her shoes back on and noticed an elderly man struggling to lift his carry-on bag back onto his shoulders. Without thinking, Maya hopped up and helped him steady it. "Thank you, young lady," he said, his voice carrying a gentle southern accent. "That's very kind of you." "You're welcome, sir." He looked at her more closely, taking in her neat cornrows pulled back into 2 puff balls, her purple hoodie with a small grease stain near the hem, her decorated sneakers. "You traveling alone?" "Yes, sir. To my grandmother's funeral." His face softened with sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, sweetheart. I'm sure she was a wonderful woman. She was the best. Well, with manners like yours, I can tell she raised you right. Where are you sitting? Maya checked her boarding pass. First class. Seat 2A. The man's eyebrows rose with pleasant surprise. Well, isn't that something? I'm in 2C right across the aisle. Looks like we'll be neighbors. I'm Harold Dawson, but you can call me Mr. Dawson. I'm Maya Richardson. Nice to meet you. They walked toward the gate together, Mr. Dawson moving slowly with a slight limp, Maya matching his pace without being asked. He told her about his own granddaughter who was about her age, lived in Seattle, loved drawing just like Maya loved airplanes. Maya found herself relaxing, the knot in her stomach loosening slightly. The first-class lounge was like stepping into a different world. Maya had never seen anything like it. Leather chairs, complimentary snacks, a quiet space away from the chaos of the main terminal. She felt suddenly self-conscious about her tilted purple suitcase and her old sneakers, but Mr. Dawson guided her to a seat near the window and showed her where the juice and cookies were. Don't be shy, he said kindly. You belong here just as much as anyone else. Those words, so similar to what her mother and grandmother had always told her, made Maya's throat tight with emotion. She nodded and got herself a cup of apple juice and 2 chocolate chip cookies, eating them slowly while watching planes take off outside the massive windows. Meanwhile, in a different part of the airport, the flight crew for United Flight 1847 to Atlanta was finishing their pre-flight briefing. The captain, a veteran pilot named Robert Martinez with 25 years of experience, reviewed weather conditions and air traffic expectations. The 3 flight attendants listened attentively, each with their own thoughts about the day ahead. Sarah Chen, 34 years old, stood at the back of the briefing room checking her phone for the 3rd time. Another text from her lawyer about divorce proceedings. Another reminder that her credit card payment was overdue. Another notification that her ex-husband had posted photos from his vacation with his new girlfriend. Sarah's jaw clenched and she silently cursed the universe for the timing of everything falling apart at once. She'd been a flight attendant for 8 years and she'd been good at it once. Genuinely good. She'd loved the travel, the interesting people, the feeling of taking care of passengers and making their journey comfortable. But lately, everything felt harder. The smiles felt forced. The patience wore thin. The constant pressure to be cheerful when her own life was crumbling felt like torture. Sarah, you're on first class today, the captain said, pulling her attention back to the briefing. We've got a full cabin, including 1 unaccompanied minor. Sarah nodded, barely listening. First class meant higher expectations, more demanding passengers, and the need to be on for the entire flight. She just wanted to get through the day without any problems. The minor is 10 years old, seat 2A, the captain continued. Standard protocols apply. Check in regularly, make sure she's comfortable. Got it, Sarah said, mentally adding it to her list of tasks. Carlos Mendez, the junior flight attendant who'd been flying for only 6 months, leaned over and whispered, First class can be intense. Let me know if you need any help today. Sarah appreciated the gesture but waved him off. I've done this 1,000 times. I'll be fine. If she'd known then how wrong she was, if she'd known that this particular flight would become the defining moment of her career, would she have paid more attention? Would she have taken a breath, centered herself, remembered why she'd chosen this job in the first place? Maybe. But probably not. Because Sarah Chen in that moment was too wrapped up in her own problems to see the storm coming. Boarding began 30 minutes before departure. First-class passengers were called first, their expensive luggage wheeled by their sides, their movements confident and assured. Sarah stood at the aircraft door with her manufactured smile, greeting each passenger with rehearsed pleasantness. Welcome aboard. Good morning. Welcome aboard. Let me help you with that. Mr. Dawson came down the jetway slowly, and Sarah immediately moved to assist him with his bag. Elderly passengers were always treated with extra care, it was basically automatic at this point. Thank you, dear, Mr. Dawson said. That's very kind. Of course. You're in seat 2C just to the left there. Behind him came a businessman named Marcus Webb, already on his phone discussing quarterly earnings with someone who clearly wasn't meeting his expectations. He barely acknowledged Sarah as he passed, settling into seat 1D and immediately pulling out his laptop. Then Patricia Hoffman, an elegant woman in her 70s wearing pearls and carrying a Louis Vuitton carry-on. She nodded graciously at Sarah and made her way to seat 3B. A young couple in their 20s came next, the man holding up his phone to film. Hey guys, Jake here and we're boarding our flight to Atlanta. First class, baby. Tessa and I are so excited. Tessa smiled at the camera, then at Sarah. Sorry, he's an influencer. We're documenting our trip. Sarah's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. How nice. Welcome aboard. And then came Maya. Small for her age, purple suitcase tilting behind her, backpack decorated with airplane pins, wearing a hoodie and jeans and those hand-drawn sneakers. She walked with careful steps, eyes wide at the size of the aircraft, clutching her boarding pass. Sarah glanced at the boarding pass, saw the unaccompanied minor flag and felt a flicker of annoyance. Unaccompanied minors meant extra work, extra attention, extra responsibility. And this one was in first class, which meant she'd have to be especially careful. Seat 2A, Sarah said, her voice flat. Window seat on the left. Thank you so much, ma'am, Maya said politely, struggling slightly with her suitcase. Sarah considered helping but was already turning to greet the next passenger. Carlos, passing by, grabbed Maya's suitcase and helped her stow it in the overhead compartment. There you go, he said with a warm smile. All set. Thank you, Maya said, sliding into her seat and immediately looking out the window. The first-class cabin was beautiful. Wide leather seats that looked like they could recline into beds, small personal screens, little compartments for phones and water bottles. Maya had never seen anything like it. She ran her hand over the smooth armrest, marveling at how much space she had. Mr. Dawson settled into the seat across the aisle and gave her a reassuring smile. First time in first class? Yes, sir. The gate agent upgraded me. Well, you're going to love it. Very comfortable. Other passengers continued boarding and the cabin filled up. Maya watched everyone, noticing how the flight attendants moved through the space with practiced ease. Sarah came by with a tray of champagne and orange juice. Good morning, Mr. Dawson. Champagne or orange juice? Orange juice would be lovely, thank you. Sarah handed him a glass, then turned to Marcus. Sir? Champagne? Yeah, and keep them coming. Long day ahead. Of course. She moved to Patricia. Ma'am? Champagne, please. Thank you, dear. Jake and Tessa each got champagne, filming themselves making a toast. Sarah smiled indulgently at them, part of the performance. And then she turned to Maya, seemed to see her for the first time, and something shifted in her expression. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't obvious to anyone not paying close attention. But it was there. A slight tightening around her eyes, a fractional stiffening of her shoulders. She moved past Maya without offering a drink. Maya waited, thinking maybe she'd come back. Children probably weren't offered champagne, obviously, but orange juice would be nice. She watched as Sarah continued down the aisle, serving other passengers, her voice bright and attentive. When Sarah returned to the galley without having offered Maya anything, Carlos noticed. Did you ask the kid in 2A if she wanted orange juice? Sarah waved him off. I'll get to her. But she didn't. Pre-flight service continued with warm towels, offered to every passenger. Sarah handed them out with tongs and a smile, the hot towels rolled precisely. She gave one to Mr. Dawson, who thanked her warmly. She gave one to Marcus, who barely looked up from his laptop. She gave one to Patricia, to Jake, to Tessa, to every passenger in first class. Except Maya. Maya noticed but said nothing. Maybe they'd run out. Maybe they'd come back with more. She didn't want to be difficult, didn't want to cause problems. Her grandmother had always taught her to be patient, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to assume the best intentions. The captain's voice came over the intercom, smooth and professional. Good morning, folks. This is Captain Martinez. Welcome aboard United Flight 1847 with service to Atlanta. We've got a flight time of about 2 hours and 15 minutes today. Weather looks beautiful, should be a smooth ride. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure. Sarah moved through the cabin one final time, checking that seatbelts were fastened, that bags were properly stowed, that seats were in their upright positions. When she got to Maya's row, she paused. Seatbelt fastened? She asked, her tone just different enough from how she'd spoken to other passengers that Mr. Dawson noticed. Yes, ma'am, Maya said. Sarah moved on without another word. The plane pushed back from the gate, and Maya gripped her armrests as the aircraft began to move. She'd flown before but not often, and takeoffs always made her nervous. The engines roared to life, that distinctive sound that's both terrifying and thrilling. The plane accelerated down the runway faster and faster, and then that magical moment when the wheels left the ground and they were airborne. Maya pressed her face to the window, watching New York City shrink beneath them. Buildings became toys, cars became ants, the world became a map. Her grandmother had told her once that this was the best part of flying, seeing how big the world was and how small we were in comparison. It was supposed to make you feel humble and amazed all at once. The plane climbed through clouds, that strange moment where everything outside turns white and thick, and then suddenly they broke through into brilliant sunshine above the cloud layer. Maya had forgotten how beautiful this was. Below them, clouds stretched out like a cotton field, white and puffy and endless. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began to settle in for the flight. Laptops came out, books were opened, headphones were plugged in. Marcus immediately returned to his work. Patricia pulled out a hardcover novel. Jake and Tessa continued filming themselves, documenting every moment. Sarah emerged from the galley with a smile. "Good morning again, everyone. We've reached our cruising altitude, and the captain has turned off the seatbelt sign. We'll be coming through with our full breakfast service shortly. In the meantime, can I get anyone anything to drink?" Orders came quickly. Coffee with cream, black, 2 sugars. Tomato juice. Water with lemon. Diet Coke. Sarah's hands moved efficiently, muscle memory taking over. This part of the job she could do in her sleep. She got to Mr. Dawson. "And for you, sir?" "Just water, please. And maybe some coffee in a bit." "Absolutely." Maya raised her hand tentatively as Sarah passed. "Excuse me?" Sarah stopped but didn't quite look at her. "Yes. Could I have some water, please? And maybe orange juice?" Something flickered across Sarah's face. "We're running low on juice. I'll see what I can find." It was a lie, and Mr. Dawson knew it was a lie because he'd just watched Sarah pour orange juice for 3 other passengers. He frowned but said nothing yet, giving Sarah the benefit of the doubt. "Okay, thank you," Maya said politely. "Just water would be fine too." Sarah nodded and moved on to Marcus. "Another champagne, sir?" "Sure, why not?" 20 minutes passed. Sarah brought out the full breakfast service, beautiful plates of fruit, yogurt parfaits, warm croissants with butter and jam. She served every passenger with that professional attentiveness that made people feel taken care of. When she got to Maya's row, she set down Mr. Dawson's breakfast with a smile. "Here you are, sir. Fresh fruit, yogurt, and a croissant. Enjoy." Then she turned to Maya, and her expression shifted to something harder to define. "Did you request a special meal?" Maya looked confused. "No, ma'am. Nobody asked me about a meal." "Well, we have limited breakfast service in first class. I'll see if there's something available in economy." Mr. Dawson's frown deepened. He'd flown first class hundreds of times, and there was always extra food. Always. "Excuse me, miss, but surely there's enough." Sarah cut him off with a professional smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Sir, I'll make sure the young lady is taken care of. Thank you for your concern." She disappeared into the galley and Maya sat very still, her hands folded in her lap. This wasn't right. Something was wrong and she knew it, but she didn't know what to do about it. Her mother's words echoed in her head. "If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately." But this wasn't an emergency, was it? It was just food. Just drinks. The flight attendant was busy, probably stressed. Maya didn't want to cause trouble. Her grandmother had faced so much worse than this, had endured actual cruelty and hatred, and she'd done it with grace and dignity. Surely Maya could handle a little negligence. Sarah returned 5 minutes later with a small bag of pretzels and a can of ginger ale. "Here you go," she said, placing them on Maya's tray table. Maya stared at the pretzels while all around her, other first-class passengers ate elaborate breakfasts off real plates with real silverware. The message was clear even to a 10-year-old, "You don't belong here." But Maya said, "Thank you, ma'am," because that's what her grandmother would have done. "Kill them with kindness," she always said. "Never let them make you small." The pretzels were stale and the ginger ale was warm. Maya ate them anyway, taking small bites, making them last. Through the window, clouds drifted by like slow-motion paintings. She thought about her grandmother, about the stories of those early flights in the 1960s when black flight attendants were novelties, when passengers would sometimes refuse to be served by them, when proving you belonged meant swallowing indignities with a smile. Had anything really changed? The cabin temperature had been comfortable during boarding, but now Maya noticed it was getting colder. The air conditioning seemed to be blasting directly on her row. She pulled her hoodie tighter and zipped it up to her chin, but the cold air seeped through the fabric. She looked around. Other passengers seemed fine. Some had even removed their jackets. But Maya was shivering, her arms covered in goosebumps. The overhead vents, she realized. The air was flowing directly from the vent above her seat. She tried to reach up to adjust it, but even standing on her seat's edge, she couldn't quite reach the control. She sat back down, wrapping her arms around herself. 30 minutes into the flight, Maya was genuinely cold. Her fingers felt stiff, her nose was running, and she could see her breath when she exhaled, which shouldn't be possible on an airplane. She looked across the aisle at Mr. Dawson, who was reading his book, a light blanket draped over his lap. A blanket. That would help. Maya looked around and noticed that most first-class passengers had blankets and pillows neatly placed on their seats or in the compartments beside them. She checked her own seat area. Nothing. Maybe they'd been out when she boarded? Maybe she was supposed to ask for one? She waited for Sarah to pass by, which took another 10 minutes. When the flight attendant finally walked down the aisle checking on passengers, Maya raised her hand again. "Excuse me, ma'am?" Sarah stopped, and there was a flash of irritation in her eyes before she smoothed it away. "Yes. I'm really cold. Could I please have a blanket?" Sarah looked at Maya for a long moment, and in that look, Maya saw something that made her stomach drop. It wasn't irritation. It was disdain. It was the look someone gives when they've already decided you're not worth their time. "We're running low on first-class amenities," Sarah said, her voice loud enough that nearby passengers could hear. "I'll see what I can find." It was the same thing she'd said about the orange juice, about the food. Running low. I'll see what I can find. Words that sounded helpful but meant nothing. "Okay, thank you," Maya said, even though something inside her knew that blanket wasn't coming. Sarah walked away and Maya watched her stop at Marcus's seat. "Sir, would you like another blanket? I noticed you don't have one." Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Oh, sure. Yeah, that'd be great. It's a little chilly." Sarah smiled and disappeared into the galley, returning moments later with not one but two neatly folded blankets. "Here you are. One for now and one for later if you need it." "Thanks," Marcus said, barely paying attention as he returned to his work. Maya watched this interaction with growing understanding. They weren't running low on blankets. Sarah had just brought out 2 of them. They were right there, in that galley, where Sarah had gone and come back with blankets for a man who hadn't even asked for them. But Maya, who had asked, who was visibly shivering, got nothing. Mr. Dawson had been watching too. He closed his book slowly, his expression troubled. He'd flown for decades, had seen all kinds of service, good and bad. But there was something about this situation that felt wrong in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Or maybe he could articulate it, but he didn't want to believe it. He looked at Maya, who had pulled her knees up to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible, trying to conserve warmth. Her lips were taking on a slightly blue tinge. That's when Mr. Dawson decided enough was enough. "Maya," he said softly, getting her attention. "Sweetheart, come here for a second." Maya looked over, confused. "Come sit with me for a moment. I want to show you something in my book." It was a kind lie, a gentlemanly excuse. Maya unbuckled and crossed the aisle, and as soon as she was close, Mr. Dawson stood and draped his suit jacket around her shoulders. It was heavy, warm from his body heat, and smelled like expensive cologne and peppermint candies. "Oh, I can't take your jacket," Maya protested. "You'll be cold." "Nonsense. I run hot. Always have. Do me a favor and wear it, otherwise I'll be uncomfortable watching you freeze." Maya wanted to refuse, wanted to be strong and independent, but the jacket was so warm and she was so cold, and the kindness in his eyes made her throat tight with emotion. She nodded and pulled the jacket tighter around her shoulders. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson." "You're welcome, sweetheart. Now let me ask you something. Has that flight attendant brought you that blanket yet?" Maya shook her head. She said they were running low. Mr. Dawson's expression hardened. "I see. Well, that's interesting because I just watched her bring 2 blankets to a passenger who didn't even ask for one." Maya looked down at her hands. "Maybe she forgot about me." "Maybe," Mr. Dawson said, though his tone suggested he thought it was something else entirely. "Or maybe she needs a reminder. You go back to your seat and I'm going to have a word with her." "No, please don't," Maya said quickly. "I don't want to cause trouble. I'm fine really. Your jacket is perfect." Mr. Dawson studied her face, seeing the fear there, the worry about making waves, about being difficult. He recognized it because he'd seen it before in his own daughter decades ago when she was the only black student in her class and didn't want to complain when teachers overlooked her, didn't want to be labeled as a problem. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "asking for basic service on a flight you're a passenger on isn't causing trouble. You understand that, right?" Maya nodded, but her eyes said she wasn't sure she believed it. "But I'll tell you what," Mr. Dawson continued. "You keep my jacket for now, and if you're still cold in 30 minutes we'll figure something else out. Fair?" "Fair," Maya agreed, returning to her seat wrapped in his jacket, which was so big it hung past her knees. Sarah watched this exchange from the galley with pursed lips. She saw Mr. Dawson give Maya his jacket, saw them talking quietly, and felt a prickle of defensiveness. She was doing her job. She had a whole cabin to take care of, not just one child. If the kid was cold, she could have asked again. It wasn't Sarah's fault if passengers weren't assertive enough. Except Maya had asked. Twice. Carlos came into the galley carrying empty breakfast plates. Hey, did you ever get that unaccompanied minor into a blanket? She looks freezing. Sarah's jaw tightened. I'm handling it. Want me to grab one? It'll take 2 seconds. I said I'm handling it, Carlos. He raised his hands in surrender. Okay. Just checking. But he wasn't okay with it. Something about Sarah's attitude today felt off, more hostile than usual. He'd noticed it during boarding, the way she'd skipped over Maya during the pre-flight service, the way she'd spoken to her differently than other passengers. Carlos was new enough to commercial aviation that he still believed in doing the job right, still took pride in taking care of passengers, especially kids flying alone. When Sarah went back into the main cabin to check on passengers, Carlos pulled a blanket from the overhead bin where they were stored. There were at least a dozen of them, neatly folded, definitely not running low. He started to walk toward Maya's seat. Sarah intercepted him. What are you doing? Getting the kid a blanket. She's freezing. I told her I would handle it. Sarah, it's been 30 minutes. She's literally blue. Just let me. Sarah took the blanket from his hands. I am the lead flight attendant on this aircraft. I manage first class. When I say I'll handle something, that means I'll handle it. Do you understand? Her voice was quiet but intense, the kind of quiet that actually felt louder than shouting. Carlos, 6 months into his career and not wanting to cause conflict with a senior crew member, backed down. Yeah, okay. I understand. Sarah took the blanket back to the storage bin and shut the door firmly. Carlos watched her with growing discomfort. This wasn't about being busy or forgetting. This was deliberate. This was a choice. And that's when he started to understand what was really happening. In seat 2A, Maya sat wrapped in Mr. Dawson's jacket, staring out the window at the clouds below. She thought about her grandmother, wondered what she would do in this situation. Probably what she'd always done. Endure with grace, prove them wrong through dignity, refuse to let cruelty change who she was. But Maya was tired of being graceful. She was tired of being cold. She was tired of being invisible. She pulled out her phone, the old model her mother had given her for emergencies, and stared at her mother's contact information. Her finger hovered over the call button. Her mother had said, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately. But this felt like tattling. This felt like she couldn't handle a simple flight on her own. This felt weak. Except her grandmother's voice echoed in her head too, something she'd said years ago when Maya was being bullied at school and didn't want to tell anyone. Baby, there's a difference between handling things on your own and suffering in silence. One is strength. The other is just pain. Maya pressed call. The phone rang twice before her mother's voice came through, professional and slightly distracted. Maya? Baby, are you okay? What's wrong? Just hearing her mother's voice made Maya's eyes sting with tears she'd been holding back. Mom, I'm fine. I'm sorry for calling. Victoria's tone immediately sharpened with focus. Maya Richardson, you do not apologize for calling me. Ever. What's going on? It's nothing really. It's cold on the plane and I asked for a blanket, but the flight attendant said they're running low and... Maya's voice cracked. Mom, I don't think she likes me. Silence on the other end, the kind of silence that felt like gathering storm clouds. What do you mean she doesn't like you? Victoria's voice was very calm, which anyone who knew her would recognize as dangerous. She didn't give me juice when she gave everyone else juice. She didn't give me breakfast like the other passengers got. She said they're running low on things, but I saw her give other people extra blankets and they didn't even ask. And I'm really cold, Mom. Mr. Dawson gave me his jacket, but I'm still cold. Victoria was standing now, wherever she was, her meeting forgotten. Put Mr. Dawson on the phone. Mom, no, I don't want to. Maya, please. Let me talk to him. Maya unbuckled and crossed the aisle again. Mr. Dawson? My mom wants to talk to you. He took the phone with raised eyebrows. Hello, this is Harold Dawson. Mr. Dawson, this is Victoria Richardson, Maya's mother. I can't thank you enough for helping my daughter. Can you tell me exactly what you've witnessed on this flight? Mr. Dawson glanced at Maya, then spoke quietly but clearly. Ma'am, I've been flying for 40 years and I've never seen service like this. Your daughter has been systematically ignored by the lead flight attendant. No beverages, no meal service. She was given a bag of pretzels while the rest of us got full breakfasts, and no blanket despite multiple requests and visible discomfort. I gave her my jacket because she was shivering so badly her lips were turning blue. Has anyone else noticed this treatment? Yes, ma'am. Several passengers are visibly uncomfortable with what they're seeing. The gentleman in 1D has been documenting it. The woman in 3B tried to intervene verbally. This isn't a case of being busy or forgetting. This is deliberate. Victoria's voice remained eerily calm. What's the flight attendant's name? Her name tag says Sarah Chen. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Please tell Maya I'll call her back in 5 minutes. And Mr. Dawson? Thank you for being kind to my daughter. I won't forget it. She's a wonderful child, ma'am. You should be very proud. I am. The call ended, and Mr. Dawson handed the phone back to Maya with a gentle smile. Your mama's going to take care of this, sweetheart. You did the right thing by calling her. Maya nodded, but she felt sick to her stomach. She'd caused trouble after all. She'd made a big deal out of nothing. What if her mother called the airline and complained and it made things worse? What if Sarah got in trouble and then was even meaner? 5 minutes felt like an hour. Maya watched the seconds tick by on the small screen in front of her seat. Around her, the first-class cabin continued its peaceful routine. Patricia was deep in her novel. Marcus typed furiously on his laptop. Jake and Tessa had fallen asleep, her head on his shoulder. Everything seemed normal. Except nothing was normal. Sarah passed through the cabin again, and this time when she walked by Maya's row, their eyes met for just a second. In that second, Maya saw something that made her understand this wasn't about blankets or orange juice or breakfast. This was about something deeper, something uglier, something that had to do with who Maya was versus who Sarah thought belonged in first class. Her phone rang. Mom. Hi, Mom. Hi, baby. Listen to me carefully. I've made some calls. Help is coming. I need you to sit tight and stay calm. Can you do that for me? What kind of help? The good kind. The kind that makes sure this never happens to you or any other child again. Maya, I need to ask you something. Do you trust me? Of course I trust you, Mom. Then trust that what I'm doing right now is not about revenge or anger. It's about making things right. It's about what your grandmother would want. Okay. Okay. I love you more than anything in this world. You remember that. I love you too, Mom. The call ended, and Maya sat back in her seat, Mr. Dawson's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, and waited for whatever was coming next. In the cockpit, Captain Martinez's phone buzzed with an incoming call from aircraft operations. This was unusual. Mid-flight calls from operations usually meant weather issues, mechanical concerns, or air traffic complications. He answered on the third ring. Captain Martinez. Captain, this is Jennifer Walsh from operations. We've received a call regarding a passenger service issue in your first-class cabin. Specifically concerning an unaccompanied minor in seat 2A. Captain Martinez frowned. What kind of issue? Multiple complaints of inadequate service and possible discrimination. The call came from a very high-priority contact. We need you to address this immediately with your lead flight attendant. Understood. I'll handle it. He hung up and turned to his co-pilot. Take over for a moment. I need to deal with something in the cabin. When Captain Martinez entered the first-class cabin, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Passengers looked up. Sarah, who was in the galley organizing beverage carts, straightened instinctively. Miss Chen, could I see you for a moment? Sarah followed him into the small galley space, her mind racing. Had someone complained? About what? She'd been doing her job, hadn't she? I've received a call from operations about a passenger service issue. Specifically regarding the unaccompanied minor in 2A. What's going on? Sarah's face flushed. There's no issue, Captain. I've been managing my cabin professionally. Then why have I received multiple complaints about this child being denied service? She hasn't been denied service. I've been busy. First class is full. I can't cater to every single request immediately. Sarah, this child asked for a blanket over an hour ago and still doesn't have one. Is that accurate? I told her I'd get her one. I've been managing multiple passengers. I just walked through the cabin. I saw at least 8 unused blankets in the overhead storage. So when you told her we were running low, what did you mean exactly? Sarah's mouth opened and closed. I meant, did you or did you not deliberately withhold service from this passenger? No. She's a child. In first class. I didn't think. I mean, she's not even paying for the seat, she was upgraded and... Captain Martinez's expression turned to stone. Stop talking. Right now. Sarah fell silent, realizing too late what she just revealed. You withheld service because she didn't, in your judgment, deserve to be in first class. Is that what I'm hearing? No, that's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Miss Chen, I am ordering you to provide that child with a blanket, a full meal service, and any other amenities she requests for the remainder of this flight. And when we land, you will report directly to operations for a formal review. Do you understand? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Captain, please, I've had a difficult week, I'm dealing with personal issues. I don't care. Your personal issues do not give you the right to mistreat a 10-year-old child. Now get her that blanket. That's an order. He turned and walked back to the cockpit, leaving Sarah standing in the galley with her world crumbling around her. Carlos watched from where he'd been pretending to organize supplies, his expression sympathetic but also vindicated. I tried to tell you, he said quietly. Sarah didn't respond. She pulled a blanket from the storage bin, the softest one available, and walked toward seat 2A with legs that felt like lead. Maya saw her coming and instinctively shrank back in her seat. Sarah's face was red, her eyes puffy, and her hands were shaking as she held out the blanket. Here, Sarah said, her voice cracking. Your blanket. She practically dropped it in Maya's lap and turned away quickly, but not before Maya saw the tears streaming down her face. Maya sat there holding the blanket, feeling a confusing mix of relief and guilt and something she couldn't quite name. She'd gotten what she asked for. She'd been proven right. So why did she feel so bad? Mr. Dawson leaned across the aisle. You okay, sweetheart? Maya nodded, wrapping the blanket around herself over his jacket. The warmth was immediate and wonderful, but it didn't reach the cold spot in her chest that had nothing to do with temperature. Mr. Dawson, she said quietly, do you think I got her in trouble? He considered his answer carefully. I think she got herself in trouble by making choices that weren't right. You just asked for basic decency. That's never wrong. But she was crying. Sometimes people cry when they realize they've done something they shouldn't have. That doesn't mean they didn't need to learn that lesson. Maya thought about this, thought about her grandmother facing discrimination with grace, thought about her mother's words about belonging, thought about Sarah's tears and wondered what had made her so mean in the first place. I wish people were just nicer to each other, Maya said. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. The rest of the flight passed in tense quiet. Sarah stayed in the galley except when absolutely necessary, her face a mask of barely controlled emotion. Carlos took over most of the first-class service, apologizing profusely to Maya and bringing her everything she could possibly want: snacks, drinks, and extra pillow. Patricia caught Maya's eye and smiled warmly, and Maya smiled back, feeling seen in a way she hadn't before. Marcus closed his laptop and actually looked at her, really looked at her, and nodded with respect. Jake and Tessa, when they woke up, were quieter than before, their phone cameras put away. The entire cabin felt different. Like everyone had witnessed something they couldn't unwitness, like a line had been crossed and now they were all on one side of it together. When the captain announced their descent into Atlanta, Maya's heart began to race for different reasons. Soon she'd land. Soon she'd see her mother. Soon she'd have to face whatever came next. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that what came next would change not just her life, but the entire airline industry. Because Victoria Richardson wasn't just a concerned mother. She wasn't just a frequent flyer. She was the owner of Apex Aviation Holdings, the parent company that owned 15 airlines including the one Maya was currently flying on. And when Victoria made calls, people listened. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical groan, and Maya felt the plane begin its final descent into Atlanta. She pressed her face to the window, watching the city grow larger beneath them, the buildings rising up to meet the sky. Somewhere down there, her mother was waiting. And somewhere down there, everything was about to change. The wheels touched down with a gentle bump, and the plane rolled down the runway toward the gate. Sarah stood at the front of the cabin, preparing to say goodbye to passengers, her professional mask barely holding together. She knew what was waiting for her when that door opened. She knew her career was probably over. She just didn't know yet how much bigger this was than her career. As the plane taxied to the gate and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Maya gathered her things slowly. Mr. Dawson's jacket, carefully folded. Her backpack with its airplane pins. Her tilted purple suitcase that she'd need help getting down from the overhead bin. Around her, passengers stood and stretched, gathering their belongings with that end-of-flight weariness. But they kept glancing at her, these strangers who'd witnessed her small humiliation, and in their eyes, Maya saw something that made her stand a little taller: solidarity. The door opened and the jetway connected with a solid thunk. And then Maya saw them. A crowd at the gate. Her mother at the center, looking like she owned not just the ground she stood on but the sky above it. And beside her, men and women in business suits, airport officials, people with clipboards and badges and serious expressions. Something big was about to happen. Sarah saw them too and went pale. Maya walked down the jetway slowly, Mr. Dawson beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Other passengers followed behind, sensing something significant was about to unfold. When Maya emerged into the gate area, Victoria was there in an instant, dropping to her knees and pulling her daughter into an embrace so tight Maya could barely breathe. "Are you okay, baby? Are you warm enough?" Maya nodded against her mother's shoulder. "I'm okay now." Victoria pulled back and examined Maya's face with an intensity that made Maya feel like her mother was memorizing every detail, making sure she was truly all right. Then Victoria stood, her expression shifting from mother to something else entirely. Something powerful and undeniable. She looked past Maya to the emerging passengers, her gaze locking onto Sarah Chen. The airport manager stepped forward. "Ms. Richardson, everything is prepared as you requested." Sarah's face registered confusion. Marcus emerged from the jetway, saw Victoria and stopped dead. "Victoria Richardson?" he said, his voice carrying shock. Recognition rippled through the crowd. Jake pulled out his phone and frantically typed. "Oh my God," he whispered to Tessa. "That's Victoria Richardson. She owns Apex Aviation Holdings." Tessa's eyes widened. "She owns this airline?" Patricia emerged, saw Victoria, and a knowing smile crossed her face. Mr. Dawson chuckled quietly beside Maya. "Well now." Sarah still didn't understand. She approached Maya and Victoria, attempting to salvage whatever professionalism she had left. "I hope she had a pleasant flight, Ms." Victoria didn't look at her, focused entirely on Maya. "Baby, is this the flight attendant?" Maya nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. Victoria finally turned her gaze to Sarah, and the temperature in the gate area seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I'd like you to meet my daughter, Maya Richardson. The child you refused basic courtesy for the past 3 hours." Sarah's face transformed from confusion to realization to absolute horror in the space of a heartbeat. Victoria continued, her voice deadly calm but carrying to every corner of the gate area. "The child you implied didn't belong in first class. The child you humiliated in front of a full cabin. The child you left shivering and hungry while you served champagne and extra blankets to passengers who didn't even ask for them." Sarah stammered, I didn't know." "You didn't know what?" Victoria's voice cut like a knife. "That she was my daughter? That she deserved basic human decency? Which one of those things should have mattered, Miss Chin?" Sarah's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, realizing the trap she'd walked into. "Let me be very clear," Victoria said. "If you had known she was my daughter, would you have treated her differently?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought. Because that's the problem, isn't it? You decided based on how she looked, how old she was, maybe the color of her skin, that she didn't deserve the same service as other passengers. You made that judgment in seconds and you acted on it for hours." The gate area was completely silent now. Other passengers from the flight had gathered, witnessing the confrontation. Travelers from other gates had stopped to watch. Airport staff stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. Victoria turned to the airport manager. "I want everyone involved in this situation in a private conference room. Now, Captain Martinez, the lead flight attendant, any witnesses willing to provide statements, and my legal team." The airport manager nodded quickly. "Of course, Ms. Richardson. Follow me." They moved through the terminal, a strange procession. Victoria and Maya at the front, Victoria's hand never leaving her daughter's shoulder. Behind them, Sarah Chen, escorted by 2 airport security officers, her face a mask of devastation. Captain Martinez, his expression grim. Carlos, the junior flight attendant, looking nervous but determined. Marcus, Patricia, and Mr. Dawson, all having volunteered as witnesses. Jake still filming discreetly. And trailing behind, Victoria's executive team, carrying briefcases and tablets, ready to document everything. The conference room was large and sterile, with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. Windows overlooked the tarmac where planes taxied and took off, a constant reminder of the industry they were all part of. Victoria waited until everyone was seated before she spoke. "I want to be very clear about why we're here," she began, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "This is not about revenge. This is not about humiliating anyone. This is about understanding what happened on Flight 1847 today, why it happened, and making sure it never happens again." She pressed a button on the conference room system, and a screen descended from the ceiling. With the cooperation of the passengers present, we've compiled video and audio documentation of today's flight. Jake, the influencer, looked surprised to be called on but quickly connected his phone to the system. The footage began to play. Everyone watched in uncomfortable silence as the screen showed Sarah serving passengers. The pre-flight beverages. Everyone getting orange juice or champagne except Maya. The warm towels. Everyone receiving them except Maya. The breakfast service. Full meals for everyone, a bag of pretzels for Maya. And then, most damning, the blanket incident. Sarah telling Maya they were running low, then immediately offering Marcus 2 blankets without him asking. The footage was clear, undeniable, and devastating. Sarah watched with tears streaming down her face, seeing her actions from an outside perspective, understanding for the first time how blatant it all looked. When the video ended, Victoria spoke again. "Captain Martinez, what did you observe?" The captain cleared his throat. "When I was alerted to the situation by operations, I personally inspected the first-class cabin. There were at least 8 blankets in overhead storage. The claim that we were running low was false. When I questioned Ms. Chen, she initially defended her actions, then admitted that she had withheld service because the passenger was upgraded and, in her words, wasn't paying for the seat." Victoria turned to the witnesses. "Mr. Dawson, what did you observe from your seat?" Mr. Dawson spoke with the careful precision of someone who'd been rehearsing his words. "I've been flying for over 40 years. I recognized discriminatory service when I saw it. This wasn't about being busy or forgetting. This was systematic exclusion of a single passenger based on, as far as I could determine, her age and race. When I gave Maya my jacket because she was visibly shivering, the flight attendant watched but took no corrective action." Patricia added, "I directly confronted the flight attendant about the treatment. She became defensive and dismissive, suggesting I focus on my own comfort rather than questioning her professionalism." Marcus spoke next, his businessman's voice analytical. "I documented the timing of all interactions. Maya requested a blanket at 9:43 a.m. She received it at 11:17 a.m., and only after captain intervention. In that same time period, I observed the flight attendant proactively offer blankets to 3 other passengers who hadn't requested them. The evidence was overwhelming." Sarah sat with her head bowed, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The regional director, Michael Chen, who joined the meeting, looked physically ill. "Miss Chen," Victoria said, her voice softer now but no less serious. "I want to hear from you. Not excuses. Not justifications. I want to understand what was going through your mind." Sarah took a shuddering breath. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know. I've been going through a divorce. I'm drowning in debt. I'm exhausted all the time. And when I saw her, this little girl in first class with her old suitcase and her homemade sneakers, I thought she didn't belong there. I thought she was taking up space that should go to paying customers. I thought." She paused, the truth heavy on her tongue. "I thought a lot of things that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with my own prejudices that I didn't even know I had." The honesty was unexpected, and the room fell silent. "When I saw Mr. Dawson give her his jacket," Sarah continued, "I should have realized what I was doing. When other passengers started watching me, started questioning my service, I should have stopped. But I was defensive. I was angry. And I took it out on a child who did nothing wrong except ask for basic service she had every right to receive." She looked at Maya for the first time. "I'm so sorry. That's inadequate, I know. But I'm truly deeply sorry." Maya, who'd been sitting quietly beside her mother, spoke for the first time. "Why did you think I didn't belong?" Sarah flinched at the direct question. Because you looked different from what I expected a first-class passenger to look like." "What do you mean different?" "You were young. You weren't dressed in expensive clothes. You were black." The last word came out choked, but she said it. Maya nodded slowly. "My grandmother was one of the first black flight attendants. She told me stories about passengers who refused to let her serve them. About colleagues who wouldn't eat lunch with her. About fighting every single day just to do her job. That was 60 years ago. She said things would be better for me." The simple statement hung in the air, an accusation more powerful than any Victoria could have made. "Were they?" Maya asked. "Were things better for me today?" Sarah shook her head, tears flowing freely now. "No, they weren't. And that's on me." Victoria let the moment breathe, let the weight of it settle on everyone in the room. Then she turned to Michael Chen, the regional director. "What consequences does your policy mandate for this situation?" Michael looked uncomfortable but spoke clearly. Given the documented evidence of discriminatory service, deliberate withholding of amenities, and the pattern of complaints in Ms. Chen's file, yes, there have been previous incidents. Company policy mandates immediate termination. Sarah closed her eyes, accepting the verdict. However, Victoria said, and everyone looked at her in surprise. I'm not interested in simply firing someone and moving on. That doesn't solve the systemic problem. Michael frowned. I'm not sure I understand. Ms. Chen's termination is appropriate. She made choices that violated company policy and basic human decency. But the fact that she made it through 8 years of employment with previous complaints that were dismissed as miscommunications tells me we have a much bigger problem than one flight attendant. Victoria stood and walked to the window overlooking the tarmac. My mother fought to integrate this industry. She believed in aviation as a force for connection, for bringing people together across differences. She believed that up in the air, we were all just humans traveling from one place to another. But clearly we haven't lived up to that vision. She turned back to the room. So here's what's going to happen. Ms. Chen, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. That decision is final and non-negotiable. Sarah nodded, accepting it. However, Victoria continued, I'm going to offer you something. Apex Aviation Holdings is implementing a comprehensive anti-discrimination training program. Not the checkbox watch a video kind. Real training developed with civil rights organizations, psychologists, and people who've experienced discrimination in aviation. It'll be mandatory for all employees from baggage handlers to executives. She looked directly at Sarah. I want you to be part of developing that training. I want you to share your story not as a villain, but as someone who didn't realize their own biases until it was too late. I want other flight attendants to hear from you what it feels like to destroy your career in a moment of prejudice. I want them to understand the real consequences. Sarah looked stunned. Why would you do that? I hurt your daughter. Because my daughter is right, Victoria said, glancing at Maya. Hurt people. And if we can turn your hurt and your mistake into something that prevents this from happening to other children, then something good comes from something terrible. She addressed the room. This is the other thing that's going to happen. Apex Aviation is implementing a passenger complaint analysis system. If there are patterns of complaints against any employee, they will be flagged immediately and investigated. No more dismissing things as miscommunications. No more second chances for discriminatory behavior. And we're implementing a passenger bill of rights that will be posted in every cabin, at every gate, on every booking confirmation. It will state clearly that all passengers, regardless of age, race, class, or appearance, are entitled to equal service. And there will be consequences for violations. Michael was typing frantically on his tablet. This is going to require significant resources. Then we'll allocate them, Victoria said simply. I didn't build this company to perpetuate the same discrimination my mother fought against. If we can't treat a 10-year-old child with basic decency, we have no business operating an airline. She turned to Maya. Baby, is there anything you want to say? Maya had been quiet through most of the meeting, processing everything. Now she looked at Sarah with eyes that held both hurt and something like understanding. I hope you learn from this, Maya said quietly. I hope you figure out why you were hurt so you stop hurting other people. My grandma always said that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean choosing not to carry the anger with you. So I forgive you. But I also hope I never see you on a plane again. The honesty of it, the grace mixed with the boundary, made several people in the room look away, moved by a child's wisdom. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Victoria addressed the captain. Captain Martinez, thank you for your intervention today. Your actions, once alerted to the situation, were appropriate and swift. However, I want to understand why it took a call from operations for you to become aware of what was happening in your cabin. The captain straightened. That's a fair question. I was focused on flying the aircraft. I trust my cabin crew to manage passenger service. But you're right, there should be systems in place that alert me to issues before they escalate to the point of needing operations involvement. Agreed, Victoria said. We'll be implementing cabin monitoring protocols. Not surveillance, but regular check-ins with unaccompanied minors and vulnerable passengers. Captains will receive briefings on any passengers requiring special attention, not just due to medical needs but also due to traveling alone or other circumstances. She pulled out a tablet and began typing. Within 90 days, every Apex Aviation aircraft will have updated training for all crew members. Within 6 months, we'll have measurable data on passenger satisfaction, broken down by demographics, to identify any patterns of disparity. Within a year, I want to see a 50% reduction in discrimination complaints across all our airlines. Michael nodded. We'll make it happen. You will, Victoria said, and there was no question it was an order, not a request. Because if we can't, I'll find people who can. She turned to the witnesses. Mr. Dawson, Patricia, Marcus, Jake, thank you for being willing to speak up. It would have been easier to look away to decide it wasn't your problem. But you didn't. You saw a child being mistreated and you acted. That's what I need more people in this industry to do. Mr. Dawson stood and offered his hand. Your daughter is remarkable, Ms. Richardson. And so was your mother if she raised you. I was honored to sit next to Maya today, even under these circumstances. Victoria shook his hand. Thank you for your kindness to her. I won't forget it. Patricia approached Maya directly. Sweetheart, I want you to know something. What happened today wasn't right, but how you handled it was extraordinary. You were patient when you shouldn't have had to be. You were gracious to someone who didn't deserve it. But you also knew when to ask for help. That's strength. Maya hugged her, surprising herself and Patricia both. The meeting concluded with arrangements for follow-up. Sarah would be escorted from the property. She'd be contacted about participating in the training development, but that was her choice. The witnesses provided their contact information for any necessary legal documentation. And Victoria's team began the work of implementing the policy changes she'd outlined. As the room cleared, Maya and Victoria stood alone for a moment. Victoria knelt down to her daughter's level once more. How are you really doing, baby? Maya thought about it. I'm tired. I'm sad about Grandma. I'm confused about everything that happened. But I'm okay. You don't have to be okay all the time. I know. But I am right now. Can we go to the funeral now? Victoria pulled her close. We can. But first, I need to tell you something. What you did today, calling me, speaking up, being honest about how you felt, that took courage. Your grandmother would be so proud of you. Do you think anything will really change? Maya asked. Or will people just be more careful about hiding it? The question was too wise for a 10-year-old, but then again Maya had learned a lot that day. Victoria considered her answer carefully. I think some people will hide it better. Some people will resist change. But I also think that every time someone speaks up, every time someone refuses to accept being treated as less than, we move a little bit forward. Your grandmother spoke up in the 1960s, even though it cost her. I spoke up today. And someday you might have to speak up too. But maybe if we keep doing it, your children won't have to. That's a long time, Maya said. It is, Victoria agreed. But lasting change always takes time. They gathered Maya's belongings, including Mr. Dawson's jacket, which Victoria insisted they find him and return with a proper thank you. They walked through the terminal, Victoria's hand on Maya's shoulder, and for a moment, they were just a mother and daughter heading to a funeral, grieving and tired and holding each other up. But they both knew that something had shifted that day. A line had been drawn. A stand had been taken. And in boardrooms and crew lounges and training facilities across 15 airlines, people were about to learn that Victoria Richardson didn't just own aviation companies. She owned her values. And she was willing to back them up with every resource at her disposal. 3 months later, Maya walked through the halls of her Brooklyn middle school with her head a little higher. On her wall at home, next to the picture of her grandmother in her vintage flight attendant uniform, hung a new photo. Maya standing beside her mother in front of an Apex Aviation aircraft, both of them smiling. Below it, a news article. Airline industry implements sweeping anti-discrimination reforms following high-profile incident. She hadn't flown since that day. Her mother had offered, even suggested a trip somewhere fun to replace the bad memory with a good one. But Maya wasn't ready yet. She would be someday. She knew that. But for now she was content to watch planes from the ground, to think about her grandmother who'd fought so hard for the sky, and to remember the day she learned that speaking up, even when you're scared, even when you're small, can change the world. In a different part of the country, Sarah Chen sat in a conference room filled with flight attendants. She was nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared to tell her story. The training program coordinator had assured her that this was voluntary, that she could stop at any time, that the goal wasn't to shame her but to educate others. But still it was hard. Admitting what she'd done. Explaining the prejudices she hadn't even known she carried. Watching the faces of her former colleagues as they realized how easy it was to slip into discriminatory behavior. I destroyed my career in 3 hours, Sarah told them. 3 hours of making the wrong choices, of letting my personal problems and my unconscious biases dictate how I treated a child. And I can never take it back. But what I can do is stand here and tell you to examine your own biases before they cost you everything. Before they hurt someone who doesn't deserve it. The room was silent, the flight attendants absorbing her words. That little girl forgave me, Sarah continued, her voice cracking. She had every right to hate me, to want me punished. And maybe she does hate me, I don't know. But she said she forgave me. And I carry that with me every day. The grace of a child I didn't deserve grace from. After the session, several flight attendants approached her with their own stories, their own realizations about times they'd made assumptions, times they'd treated passengers differently without thinking about it. The conversations were uncomfortable but necessary. Sarah had become something she'd never imagined, a cautionary tale with a purpose. She'd never fly again. That part of her life was over. But if her mistake could prevent even one other person from making the same choices, maybe something good could come from it after all. Victoria stood in her office at Apex Aviation headquarters, looking at the data on her screen. Customer satisfaction scores were up 23%. Discrimination complaints were down 47%, exceeding her 6-month target. Flight attendants who'd gone through the new training program reported feeling more confident in handling diverse passenger needs. And most importantly, unaccompanied minors were now receiving enhanced service protocols across all their airlines. Her assistant knocked and entered. Ms. Richardson, you have the board meeting in 10 minutes. Victoria nodded, gathering her materials. She pulled up one more document on her screen before leaving. The Passenger Bill of Rights, now displayed in every aircraft at every gate on every booking confirmation. The document her mother should have had in 1965. The document her daughter needed in 2026. The document that said clearly and unequivocally, you belong here. All of you. No exceptions. She closed her laptop and headed to the meeting, carrying with her the memory of her mother's strength, her daughter's courage, and the responsibility of turning both into lasting change. That evening, Maya sat at her desk doing homework. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How was school, baby? Good, Maya typed back. We're learning about the civil rights movement in history class. What do you think about it? Maya paused, thinking. Then she typed, I think Grandma was part of it. And I think maybe I was too, a little bit. And I think it's not over yet. Victoria read the message and felt tears prick her eyes. Her daughter understood. At 10 years old, she understood what some people never learned in a lifetime. That justice isn't a destination but a journey. That change doesn't happen because someone in power decides to grant it, but because ordinary people refuse to accept being treated as less than they are. That speaking up matters. That grace and strength aren't opposites but partners. She typed back, you're absolutely right. And your grandma would be so proud of how you're carrying on her legacy. I love you, baby. Love you too, Mom. Maya put down her phone and returned to her homework, just a regular kid in a regular Brooklyn apartment, doing regular middle school work. But she knew she wasn't quite regular anymore. She'd been tested in a way most people never are. She'd faced injustice and chosen to speak up rather than suffer in silence. She'd chosen forgiveness without forgetting. She'd chosen to believe that people could change, that systems could improve, that the arc of the moral universe really did bend toward justice, even if you had to grab it and bend it yourself sometimes. Outside her window, a plane flew overhead, its lights blinking against the darkening sky. Maya watched it for a moment, thinking about all the people on board. Wondering if they were being treated with dignity and respect. Hoping that her grandmother's dream, her mother's work, and her own small stand had made it a little more likely that they were. And then she went back to her homework because that's what you do. You change the world and then you do your homework. You stand up for justice and then you live your life. You honor those who came before you by refusing to accept the injustices they fought against, but also by embracing the joy and normalcy they wanted for you. 3 months after a flight attendant refused a black girl a blanket, and her billionaire mother who owned the plane stepped in, the aviation industry was different. Not perfect, not finished, but different, better, changed. And that's how progress happens. Not all at once, not with trumpets and fanfare, but with one person, one moment, one choice to say, this isn't right and I'm not going to pretend it is. Maya Richardson said it at 10 years old, wrapped in a borrowed jacket, shivering in seat 2A. And the world listened. Not because she was loud or dramatic or powerful, but because she was right. And because her mother had the power to amplify her rightness until it became impossible to ignore. That's the thing about power. It's not inherently good or bad. It's what you do with it that matters. Victoria Richardson could have used her power for revenge. She could have destroyed Sarah Chen's life beyond repair. She could have turned her daughter's suffering into a weapon. Instead, she turned it into a lesson. into policy changes, into training programs, into a future where maybe, just maybe, the next 10-year-old black girl who flies alone won't have to fight for a blanket, won't have to prove she belongs, won't have to choose between suffering in silence and speaking up. That's what Dorothy Richardson fought for in 1965. That's what Victoria Richardson fought for in 2026. And that's what Maya Richardson will carry forward into whatever the future holds. Because some legacies are worth inheriting. Some battles are worth continuing. And some moments, however painful, however difficult, however small they might seem, matter more than we can possibly know at the time. A flight attendant refused a black girl a blanket. It happens every day in 1,000 small ways, the casual cruelties that people inflict without thinking, the biases they don't even know they carry. But this time the girl spoke up. The witnesses didn't look away. The mother had the power to demand change. And together they turned a moment of injustice into a movement toward something better. It won't be the last time someone is treated unfairly. It won't be the last time a child has to choose between silence and speaking up. But maybe it'll be a little less common. Maybe the consequences will be a little more certain. Maybe the arc of the moral universe will bend a little faster. And maybe, somewhere in the sky right now, there's a 10-year-old kid in seat 2A, wrapped in a warm blanket, eating a proper breakfast, being treated with the dignity and respect that every human being deserves, regardless of who they are or what they look like or how much their ticket cost. Maybe. That's what hope looks like. Not certainty. Not perfection. Just maybe. Just the chance that tomorrow might be a little better than today because someone chose to speak up, someone chose to listen, and someone chose to act. So here's the question I'll leave you with. When you witness injustice, what will you choose? Will you look away and tell yourself it's not your problem? Will you feel uncomfortable but stay silent? Or will you be like Mr. Dawson, offering your jacket when someone is cold? Like Patricia, directly confronting wrong behavior? Like Marcus, documenting what you see? Like Victoria, using whatever power you have to demand better? Because the truth is, we all have some kind of power. Maybe it's not owning 15 airlines. Maybe it's just being willing to say, this isn't right, when everyone else is pretending not to notice. Maybe it's offering kindness when cruelty is easier. Maybe it's choosing to see people's humanity instead of your assumptions about them. That's the legacy Dorothy Richardson left. That's the lesson Maya Richardson learned. And that's the challenge for all of us. The sky belongs to everyone. The question is, will we act like it? If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of the power of speaking up and the responsibility we all carry to stand against injustice, then share it. Let it reach someone who needs to hear it. Let it spark conversations that need to happen. Let it be one more voice in the chorus saying, we can do better, we must do better, and we will do better. Because change doesn't happen in silence. It happens when enough people decide they've had enough of injustice and they're willing to do something about it, whatever their sphere of influence might be. Subscribe if you want more stories about quiet courage, about ordinary people making extraordinary choices, about the ongoing fight for dignity and justice in spaces where it's still not guaranteed. And remember, you belong here. Wherever here is, whatever space you're in, you belong. And if anyone tries to tell you differently, they're wrong. Don't suffer in silence. Speak up. Ask for help. Demand better. Because you're worth it. You always have been. You always will be. That's not just Maya's story. It's all of our stories. And it's not over yet.